The smell of burnt wiring and recycled air was the first thing anyone noticed. About Durith 9. The second thing was the noise. Hundreds of species moved through its corridors at all hours, clicking, hissing, barking, humming. And the station swallowed all of it without complaint. It was old, it was crowded, and 3 of its 4 ventilation grids ran at half power. Nobody who mattered seemed to care. Dren Calloway had worked on Durith 9 for 2 years. He was a human, which, on this station, meant he was either invisible or mildly amusing to look at, depending on who was doing the looking. He was average height, average build, and had the kind of face that people forgot 10 minutes after meeting him. He carried a battered data tablet everywhere, drank synthetic coffee that tasted like warm regret, and kept a very small desk in the Commerce Authority's Audit Division on Level 4. His job was numbers. He checked them. He compared them. He followed them wherever they went. Most audits were boring. Most of them were supposed to be. That morning, he had been assigned a new file. The Vorkai Dominions Revenue Sharing Compliance Review, a standard check to confirm that Alpha Vrasha's Sector 7 operation was paying its agreed share into the station's joint infrastructure account. The Neutral Zone Treaty required it every 18 months. It had been signed off clean 3 times in a row by the 2 auditors before Dren. He had no reason to expect anything different. He opened the file, poured his coffee, and started reading. The Vorkai were not a species that invited curiosity. They stood nearly 2.5 meters tall, were covered in dark scaled hide, and had spent the last 4 centuries building one of the most rigid dominance hierarchies in the known galaxy. At the top of that hierarchy sat the Alpha, one individual whose word carried the weight of law, tradition, military force, and, in practical terms, the right to end any life that inconvenienced him. Alpha Vrash was currently the most powerful Vorkai in 3 sectors. His war cruiser was docked at Durith 9's upper port. His enforcers walked the station's corridors, and most other species stepped aside without being asked. Dren knew all of this. Everyone on the station knew it. It was simply the landscape of the place, like the smell and the noise. He kept reading. The first thing he noticed was a rounding pattern. Small numbers, fractions, of credit units, consistently trimmed from the infrastructure account. Deposits over a period of many months. On their own, each one meant nothing. Together, they added up to something that should not have been there. He made a note and moved on. The second thing he noticed was a sequence of internal transfers. Funds moved from one account to another, then split, then moved again, in a way that was neat and deliberate and looked, at first pass, like standard administrative reorganization. He ran a trace on the destination accounts. 3 of them did not match any registered Vorkai government entity. He made another note. By midday, he had 6 notes. By evening, he had 19. He was still at his desk when Senna came in to deliver a secondary ledger. He had requested. She was Vorkai, young, low-ranked, assigned to station financial oversight. She moved quietly and kept her eyes down in the way that lower-tier Vorkai learned early and never entirely unlearn it. She set the ledger on his desk. She glanced at his screen. Her eyes moved across the figures for just a moment. Then she looked away very quickly and took a careful step back. Is everything satisfactory? She asked. Getting there, Dren said. He turned the tablet toward her slightly. Do you recognize this account designation? It comes up 4 times in Q2. She looked at it the way a person looks at something they wish they had not been asked to look at. I would have to check, she said. Sure, Dren said. Can you check tonight? A pause. I will try. She left. Dren watched the door close, then turned back to his screen. He was not alarmed yet. Numbers had a way of being messy for boring reasons. Administrative errors, misfilings, system migrations. He had seen it 100 times. He would follow the trail until it went somewhere or nowhere, and then he would write whatever the evidence told him to write. That was the job. That was all it was. He stayed at his desk for another 2 hours. When he finally left, he passed through the corridor that connected level 4 to the residential block. 1 section of the wall there had a permanent black scorch mark where a coolant line had burst 8 months ago. A maintenance notice was still taped beside it, long since faded. He had walked past it 100 times. Tonight, for some reason, He stopped and looked at it. He thought about the infrastructure account. He thought about the numbers that had not gone where they were supposed to go. He thought about what a coolant line burst cost to fix if the maintenance budget was properly funded, versus what it cost when the money was somewhere else. Then he walked home, made more bad coffee, and went to sleep. He had no idea yet how deep it went, but the numbers were already talking. He just had to keep listening. 3 days into the audit, Dren pulled the full 3-year financial archive. For Vorkai Sector 7, it took 6 hours to process. The system flagged 14 access warnings. The records were classified at a level that technically required additional clearance. Dren checked the neutral zone treaty, found the subsection that gave active auditors unrestricted access to any account connected to shared infrastructure funds, and submitted the clause number to the system. The warnings cleared. He downloaded everything. He spread the data across 4 screens. What he found was not a rounding error. It was not a filing mistake. It was not the kind of thing that happened because someone forgot to carry a number or update a budget code. It was a system, a careful, patient, well-designed system. The money moved in small pieces at first, too small to trigger automatic alerts, too spread out to look like anything other than normal station accounting. Then it pooled and holding accounts registered to trade licenses that existed on paper but corresponded to no actual business. From there it moved again, split across 4 private accounts, all of them registered to Vorkai noble families with direct ties to Alpha Vrash's inner circle. Dren traced every thread. He built a map. He ran the totals. The infrastructure account, the fund that paid for the station's life support, grid, its ventilation systems, its coolant lines, its emergency medical bays, had been quietly drained of nearly 40 million credit units over 31 months. 40 million. Enough to have rebuilt the entire life support system twice over, and still had funds left for the 3rd level's broken water recyclers that had been out of service for a year. He sat back in his chair and looked at the number for a while. Then he pulled the station maintenance logs for the same 31 months. He cross-referenced them with the infrastructure fund withdrawals. The pattern was not subtle once you knew where to look. Every major maintenance failure. The coolant burst on level 4, the oxygen scrubber collapse in the lower docks. The heating failure in the worker residential block last winter had occurred. Within weeks of a large fund withdrawal, the money left. The systems failed. People got hurt. He opened the incident reports. He started reading the names of the injured. Then the names of the dead. 22 workers killed in maintenance-related accidents over 31 months. That was high for a station this size, but not impossible, and none of the individual incidents had been flagged as anything other than equipment failure. Dren looked at the maintenance requests that had been filed before. Each failure, repair requests for the exact systems that later broke, denied, or deferred, in each case, due to insufficient infrastructure funding. He sat very still for a moment. Then the door opened, and Senna came in. She had the account designation he had asked about the night before. She held the paper out to him, and when he took it, and she saw what was already on his screens, her hand did not quite let go of the page immediately. That is, she started, then stopped. Come look, Dren said. She came. She looked. He walked her through the transfer map, the totals, the maintenance logs, the incident reports. He did it calmly and in order, the way he would explain any audit finding to any colleague. Senna did not speak. Her breathing changed about halfway through. When he finished, she stepped back. You need to close this file, she said. Her voice was very quiet. You need to write that the accounts are compliant. And you need to close this file. I can't do that, Dren said. Those accounts belong to Alpha Vrash. He approved every transfer. He knows what is in those records. She was not being cruel. She was being honest. The way someone is honest when they are frightened and trying to help. If you submit this, he will know it was you. He'll know anyway, Dren said. My name is on the audit. Then you understand what I am telling you. I understand, Dren said. He looked at his screen. At the name of a Vorkai worker, low clan, no. Listed family, died when a coolant seal failed in the lower dock 14 months ago. The repair request for that seal had been submitted 3 times. Denied 3 times. Insufficient funding. Were any of those 22 yours? He asked. Vorkai, I mean. Senna was quiet for a moment. 3 were from lower-tier clans. They had no protectors. No one filed complaints on their behalf. Dren nodded slowly. He saved his current working file to his main drive. Then he saved a copy to his personal encrypted storage. Then he sent a second encrypted copy to a remote data hold registered in his home system. Then he began drafting the formal structure of his audit report. What are you doing? Senna asked. My job, Dren said. She watched him for a moment. She seemed to want to say something else. Instead, she left, and the door closed behind her, and the office was quiet, except for the distant noise of the station and the soft sound of Dren typing, steady and without hurry, late into the night. The numbers had told him everything. Now he just had to write it down. Word reached Alpha Vrash not through his intelligence network or his station contacts. It reached him through a mid-level commerce authority administrator named Polt, who had seen the size of the record's request. Dren had filed and decided that delivering interesting news to powerful people was a good way to stay safe in an uncertain world. Polt requested a private audience. He was made to wait 4 hours in a corridor outside Vrash's reception chamber, which was the Vorkai way of reminding visitors of their place before they were permitted to speak. When he was finally let in, he presented his summary in under 3 minutes, bowed as deeply as his spine allowed, and backed out of the room. Alpha Vrash sat with the information for a moment. Then he laughed. It was a short sound, a low, rumbling dismissal, and the 3 noble advisors seated nearby laughed with him, because that was the appropriate response when the Alpha found something funny. A human, Vrash said. An auditor. One of the advisors, a thin-necked Vorkai named Ruvel, leaned forward. The file can be corrupted. I can have the archive records altered before he submits anything formal. It would take a day at most. Another advisor, older and more cautious, suggested a bribe. Humans respond. Well, to financial comfort. Offer him a consulting arrangement. Double whatever. The Commerce Authority pays him. He will find a reason to write a clean report. The third advisor said nothing for a moment, then spoke carefully. We should consider having him removed from the station. A transfer request from this office would not be questioned. Vrash listened to all 3. He was not concerned. He had faced political challenges before, actual challenges, from Vorkai lords with armies and old clan grudges and decades of strategic patience. A human bookkeeper with a data tablet was not a challenge. It was an irritation. Send Herek and Das, he said. Make him understand. Herek and Das were Vrash's personal enforcement pair. They were not subtle, and they were not meant to be. Subtlety, in Vorkai culture, was what you used when you weren't sure you were stronger. Vrash was always sure. They found Dren in his office on level 4. He was at his desk. He did not look up immediately when they came in, which was either very calm or very stupid. Herek decided it was probably stupid. They were both in full enforcement armor. They filled the doorway completely. The office felt smaller with them in it, in the way a room feels smaller when something large and dangerous has entered and has not yet decided what to do. Dren looked up. He looked at them the way a person looks at something mildly inconvenient, like a slow loading screen or a chair in the wrong position. Can I help you? He asked. Herek spoke. He was thorough about it. He described, in specific and unhurried terms, what the Alpha's displeasure looked like in practice. He mentioned several individuals who had created problems for Vrash over the years and then quietly stopped existing as problems. He described the station's outer hull and the distance between it and the nearest shipping lane. He made sure Dren understood that no treaty protection applied to accidents. Dren listened to all of it without expression. He did not fidget. He did not go pale the way Herek had seen other soft-skinned species go pale when genuinely frightened. He just sat there with his hands resting on the desk, and his eyes on Herek's face, following the words like someone sitting through a presentation they had already prepared a response to. When Herek finished, Dren was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. Then he said, All right, tell Alpha Vrash that my audit report will be submitted to the Neutral Zone Authority at 0800 station time tomorrow. The full report, all 200+ pages. Every transfer, every account, every name. He paused. I have encrypted copies filed in 3 separate off-station data holds. If I miss a single check-in protocol in the next 18 hours, all 3 copies go out automatically to 7 independent news networks and the Galactic Senate Commerce Committee. Not because I scheduled it. Because the system will do it without me. He picked up his tablet. There's nothing to stop. There's no one to threaten. It's already in motion. Good evening. He looked back at his screen. Herrick stood there for a moment. Then Doss looked at Herrick. Herrick looked at Doss. Neither of them moved for a few seconds, which was unusual, because they always knew what to do next. They left. Senna had been in the corridor. She had not meant to be there. She had been returning a secondary ledger, but she had heard every word through the half-open door. She pressed herself against the wall as Herrick and Doss passed her. They did not acknowledge her. She looked through the doorway at Dren. He had already turned back to his work. His hand was moving across the tablet. He was making notes. Senna had lived her whole life inside the Vorkai hierarchy. She had learned its rules before she could speak them clearly. She knew what it meant when the Alpha sent Herrick and Doss. She knew what it meant when someone still said no afterward. She did not have a word for what Dren was. Brave did not quite cover it. Foolish did not cover it either. There was something else there, something quiet and mechanical and completely serious that she could not name yet. She stood in the corridor for a long time after the enforcers had gone. By the next morning, Vrosh had moved past amusement. He contacted the station commander, a Brellan bureaucrat named Osek, who had held his post for 11 years by being reliably useful to whoever held the most power near him. Osek was good at reading situations. He read this one quickly and filed a credential review request against Dren's audit license. Within the hour, citing an administrative irregularity in the original assignment documentation. Under Standard Commerce Authority procedure, an active auditor under credential review could not submit formal findings until the review was resolved. Reviews took between 5 and 30 days. Dren received the notification at 0640. He read it. Then he opened the Neutral Zone Treaty document, the full version, not the summary, and went to Section 14, Subsection 7, Paragraph 3. He had read it 4 days ago and bookmarked it. The subsection was specific. During an active investigation into potential fraud affecting shared infrastructure accounts, no credential review, transfer, request, or administrative hold could be applied to the assigned auditor without approval from the Neutral Zone Authority's Oversight Board. The fraud threshold that triggered this protection was 15 million credit units, or above. Dren's findings sat at 40 million. He filed the subsection citation directly to Osek's office and carbon copied it to the Neutral Zone Authority's legal team. The credential review was nullified by midday. Osek did not respond to the notification. He was presumably very busy looking out a window somewhere. Then the bribe came. It was delivered in person by one of Vrosh's noble subordinates, a sleek and well-dressed Vorkai named Kaval who clearly considered himself the kind of person who solved problems that brute force couldn't. He arrived with 2 attendants and a formal offer document printed on actual paper, which was an extravagance meant to signal seriousness. The offer was substantial. A long-term consulting contract with a Vorkai trade body, relocation to a comfortable posting on a newer, better-funded station, a housing allowance, a travel allowance, a signing bonus that was more than Dren made in 4 years. Kaval presented it with the confidence of someone who had never had this kind of offer refused. Dren read the document. He read all of it, which seemed to mildly surprise Kaval. Then he set it down. I appreciate the offer, Dren said. I'm going to decline. Kaval waited for the rest of the sentence. There was no rest of the sentence. The report goes out at 0800 tomorrow, Dren said. You're welcome to stay for coffee, but I only have the synthetic kind. Kaval left without the document. One of his attendants had to come back for it because it was expensive paper and apparently someone cared about that. That evening, Vrosh called a serious meeting with his senior advisors. Not the quick dismissal of 2 days ago. An actual meeting, seated, with the door closed. He wanted to understand what he was dealing with. His oldest advisor, a veteran named Gorval who had spent decades studying non-Vorkai species on behalf of the Dominion, spoke at length. He explained, that humans were a young species, recently introduced to galactic civilization, and that most of the existing intelligence on them focused on their physical limitations, their soft tissue, their short lives, their relatively modest strength. These were accurate observations, he said, but they had led to one important error in assessment. Humans, Gorville explained, did not have a submission reflex. Most species did, a biological response to overwhelming dominance that produced deference and compliance. It was the foundation of the Vorkai hierarchy. It was how the Brelin, the Quesi, and most of the mid-tier species in the known galaxy operated. When the Alpha displayed power, the reflex activated. The challenge ended. Order was maintained. Humans had not evolved with a single Alpha. They had evolved in competing tribal groups where the main survival advantages were collective cooperation, shared rules, and a stubborn refusal to let those rules be overridden by whoever was loudest or largest in the room. Their response to dominant displays was not compliance. It was, more often, irritation. This particular human, Gorville said carefully, is not defying you out of courage. He is not making a calculated political move. He believes he is simply doing a job that the rules say he is permitted to do, and he cannot understand why your power should change that, because in his framework, your power doesn't apply to the rules. The rules exist outside you. He answers to the rules, not to you. The room was quiet. How do we make him stop? Vrash asked. Gorville considered the question. You would need to change the rules. Legally, through the treaty bodies, which takes longer than the time remaining before his report is filed. Another long silence. A younger advisor tried. We could. If you suggest another bribe, Vrash said, you can leave. The advisor closed his mouth. Meanwhile, on level 4, Dren's colleague Barrett stopped by the office. Barrett was human, had been on Durith 9 longer than Dren, and had the look of someone who had made peace with keeping his head down a long time ago. People are talking, Barrett said. Are you actually going through with it? Yeah, Dren said. Are you scared? Dren thought about it. Really thought about it, which Barrett had not expected. A bit, Dren said. But I keep thinking about those workers. 22 people. Dead because money got stolen from the maintenance fund. Nobody's filed anything. Nobody's pushed back. If I write a clean report, that just keeps going. He shrugged. So, Barrett looked at him for a long moment. Then he nodded once and left. He didn't tell Dren to be careful. There didn't seem to be any point. At 0758, Dren sat at his desk with the completed report open on his screen. 219 pages. Every transfer mapped. Every shell account named and traced to its owner. Every maintenance failure cross-referenced, with its corresponding fund withdrawal. Every incident report attached. Every dead worker named, not as a statistic at the end, but listed in the opening summary, the first thing anyone reading the document would see. He had written the report in the dry, precise language that audit documents required. No accusations, no emotion, just figures, sources, cross-references, and conclusions that followed from the evidence like water running downhill. The evidence was not subtle. The conclusions were not either. At exactly 0800, he submitted it to the Neutral Zone Authority's formal receiving office. He received an automated confirmation receipt at 0800. In 4 seconds, he saved the receipt. He sent copies to his encrypted off-station holds. Then he made coffee and waited. The Neutral Zone Authority's regional office opened a preliminary review. By mid-morning. By early afternoon, they had escalated it to a formal investigation. The size of the discrepancy required it, 40 million. Credit units was not something that could be quietly reviewed and filed. A case that large went to the Senate Commerce Committee. The regional office sent notification to all named parties. Alpha Vrash received his notification while meeting with 2 of the noble families who were also named in the report. The timing was not accidental. The treaty process was automatic. Notifications went out simultaneously to all named parties the moment the formal investigation opened. Vrash could not be informed before the others. He could not prepare a coordinated response. He simply received the document at the same moment as everyone else. Within 6 hours, 2 of the 3 noble families in the report had filed separate statements distancing themselves from the account activities. and placing full responsibility on the administrative staff who had managed the transfers. Neither statement mentioned Vrash by name. Both of them implied, carefully and without saying so directly, that they had not been fully aware of where certain fund movements had originated. In Vorkai politics, this had a specific meaning. It was not loyalty. It was positioning. The families were watching which way the situation was falling and stepping to the side. Vrash saw it immediately. He had done the same thing to others earlier in his career. He called his ship's bridge and told them to prepare for departure. His war cruiser had been docked at Durith 9's upper port for 11 days. It would leave within the hour. The departure clearance was denied. Vrash's bridge crew filed the request again. The denial came back faster. The second time, with a reference code attached. The code pointed to Neutral Zone Treaty Section 22, the Investigation Hold Clause. During an active Senate Commerce Committee investigation, no party formally named in the proceedings could leave the jurisdiction of the station where the investigation had been opened without approval from the Oversight Board. The approval process took a minimum of 30 days. The station's docking clamps were already engaged. They had engaged automatically the moment the committee investigation was formally opened. Nobody on the station had operated them manually. The system had done it because the treaty said it should. Vrash demanded to know which station official had authorized the hold. He was informed, with bureaucratic patience, that no station official had authorized anything. The hold was automatic. It activated on its own when the required conditions were met. The conditions had been met when the audit report was filed. The audit report had been filed by the assigned auditor. The process had simply proceeded as the treaty described. There was no individual to confront, no official to pressure, no person standing at the end of the chain who could be persuaded or threatened to undo what had been done. The mechanism had run because Dren had filed a report, and filing the report was the job he had been assigned. Vrash sat for a long time in his chamber. Eventually, he asked his advisors to pull the full personnel file on Dren Calloway, not a summary, the full file. He wanted to understand. Gorval read it aloud. Human male, 37 years old. Mid-level. Auditor, Commerce Authority, neutral zone posting. Prior postings on 2 other stations, both without incident. No political associations. No significant personal wealth. No family currently posted off-planet. No recorded disputes. No recorded commendations except a single entry. 3 years ago, exceptional accuracy in quarterly revenue reporting, noted by a department supervisor who had since retired. That was the whole file. Vrash looked at the ceiling of his chamber for a long time. Meanwhile, Senna had spent 2 days making a decision. She had gone over it. From every angle she knew. She had thought about her clan obligations, her career, her personal safety, and the 3 lower clan workers whose names she still remembered from the incident reports she had processed last year. Without fully reading, she thought about the fact that she had known, dimly, and without wanting to look directly at it, that the accounts were wrong. She had known for a long time. She went to the Neutral Zone Authority's regional office and asked to file a witness corroboration statement supporting the audit findings. A formal statement, on the record, with her name attached. The investigator handling her intake asked if she understood what a formal corroboration meant for her standing within the Vorkai administrative structure. Yes, Senna said. The investigator began the intake process. Senna sat in the chair across from her and answered every question completely and in the right order. And her hands were steady the whole time, which surprised her a little. On level 4, Dren finished his documentation, organized his working files for handover to the committee investigators, and began filling out his billable hours form for the audit period. He noted the 11 cups of synthetic coffee he had charged to the department expense account over the past 2 weeks and hoped nobody would make an issue of it. He had a feeling they might. 6 weeks after Dren filed his report, the Galactic Senate Commerce Committee closed its preliminary investigation and opened formal proceedings. The hearings were not dramatic in the way that some public proceedings are. They were long, technical, and thorough, which in their own way was worse. For the people on the wrong side of them, dramatic hearings have moments. Speeches, confrontations, turning points. Technical hearings have evidence. Evidence does not move. It does not respond to arguments about honor or tradition or political standing. It simply sits there and says what it says. What the evidence said, in this case, was clear and complete and sourced. On every page. Alpha Vrash was formally censured by the Senate Commerce Committee. His authority over Sector 7 trade revenues was suspended indefinitely pending full financial restitution to the station's infrastructure account. The three noble families named in the report faced separate criminal proceedings under neutral zone financial law, a jurisdiction that applied to all parties operating within treaty-governed space regardless of their home systems. Legal traditions. Two of Vrash's senior advisors, including Ruvel, who had first suggested corrupting the archive records, were barred from holding any position in Vorkai government trade administration for a period of 10 years. Vrash himself was not imprisoned. He was too senior for that, and the political machinery around him was too complicated for a clean criminal outcome. But his standing in the Vorkai dominion collapsed. Not because enemies had beaten him, not because a rival clan had outmaneuvered him, because a human in a small office on a mid-tier station had done his job with complete accuracy, and the rules that Vrash had spent 4 decades treating as background decoration had turned out to be real. The infrastructure fund was restored in full. Repair crews arrived on Durith 9. Within 2 weeks of the preliminary ruling, actual crews with actual parts, with actual funding behind them. The ventilation grid on level 3 came back to full power for the first time in over 2 years. The oxygen scrubbers in the lower docks were replaced. The water recyclers that had been broken for 14 months were fixed in 3 days once someone was actually paid to fix them. The station smelled different, cleaner. Several residents mentioned it to each other without fully knowing why things felt different, and then someone pointed out the ventilation, and everyone understood. In the maintenance corridor on level 4, beside the faded repair notice that had been taped to the wall for months, someone put up a small board. On it were the names of the 22 workers who had died. The families of the 3 lower clan Vorkai workers had organized it. A few other families had added names. Senna attended the small gathering when the board went up. She stood at the back and did not say anything. Before she left, she placed a flat gray stone from her home world on the small shelf below the board. No one asked her to explain it. She did not explain it. Senna had accepted a formal protected status offer from the neutral zone authority 3 weeks into the proceedings. Her corroboration statement had been significant, an insider witness with direct access to the accounts, filing independently, had confirmed everything Dren's numbers had already proven. The 2 records together left no gaps. She had crossed a line with her own people that had no going back. She understood this. She found, checking herself carefully on the subject, that she was not sorry. She was frightened about certain practical matters, and she was unsure of what came next, but she was not sorry. That was new information about herself. She filed it away and kept moving. Dren's expense report was rejected by the Commerce Authority's Finance Department on the grounds that synthetic coffee purchased from a personal vendor did not qualify as a billable audit expense under the standard field allowance policy. Dren filed a formal objection, citing a subsection of the Neutral Zone Authority's auditor expense guidelines that covered consumables necessary to the sustained performance of extended field audits. The Finance Department rejected the objection. Dren requested a review. The review went to a panel. The panel took 11 days to rule. The panel sided with Dren on 9 of the 11 cups and required the department to cover those. The remaining 2 were ruled personal discretionary purchases consumed outside billable hours. Dren accepted the partial outcome. He told Barrett about it over lunch. Barrett stared at him for a long moment and said, "You filed a formal appeal. Over coffee." "Over the principle," Dren said. "Also the coffee." Barrett did not have a response to that. He ate his lunch. Somewhere in the Galactic Senate's administrative offices, a mid-level observer named Wellen, who had attended the Durith 9 hearings on behalf of the New Species Integration Committee, sat at her desk and wrote an internal memo. It was 3 pages long. The relevant section read as follows. Current documentation characterizes humans as physically limited, politically minor, and of low strategic concern. This characterization is accurate in narrow physical terms and profoundly incomplete in every other respect. This species does not evaluate threat or authority the way most galactic civilizations do. They do not require strength to resist dominant actors. They require only the conviction that the rules are on their side and the patience to use them correctly. The subject of this case held no weapons, no allies, no political backing, and no special status. He held a treaty, document, and a 200-page report. He did not need anything else. Recommend immediate and comprehensive revision of all human integration. Briefings. Further study is urgently advised. The memo was filed. Whether anyone read it quickly enough was a separate problem. On level 4, Dren had a new file open. New numbers. A shipping consortium. This time, mid-rim territory flagged for a revenue discrepancy in there. Fuel tax reporting. Small on the surface. Probably nothing. He poured his coffee. He started reading. The galaxy had spent 2 years deciding what to make of humans. Dren Calloway had spent 2 weeks proving that was already the wrong question. They were not trying to be made anything. We